Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022, and I'm your host, George Kerth. Cody Roadcap cannot be with us today, but it's okay because we got the one and only Tyler Snyder in the house. Tyler, see your little head dance there. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. You can't really tell it from my camera view, but I'm currently sitting in a pretty empty room. Fun fact, but this is going to be the last Couch GMs episode that I record from my house. I am in the process of moving. So the next time I am on the podcast with you boys, it's going to be from a new location.
Super secret location, correct?
Super secret. Crazy.
He's moving to the Batcave, if anyone didn't get it.
Someone's got to.
All right, while Tyler goes to set up to save the universe, I'm just kidding. He's going to stay with us here for this episode. We are going to be talking some NFL news and notes from the past week, and we are going to be giving our draft preview on the quarterback and tight end positions today. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com and our social media channels for more than you get from this show. Tyler, let's jump right into NFL news. Now, I know there's not a lot of NFL news this week, and we have to address the sad news here first. It was reported over the weekend that Dwayne Haskins passed at the age of 24 after a incident where he was hit by a car down in Florida. Obviously, very sad news for the Steelers quarterback. But Tyler, what are your thoughts? And you want to give a little condolence here to the Haskins family?
Yeah, I mean, there's no downplaying this. I know there was a lot of hate going out towards Adam Schefter based off the way that he reported this news, whether it was more about his struggles in the NFL or more about the fact that he passed away. But there's really no downplaying the fact that this was, whether he was an elite all-star quarterback or if he was some guy on the bench, he is still a human being, and a young one at that. He was only 24, I believe. So uh, it's crazy to see somebody taken so young. He had so much potential. I would have loved to see what he could actually do, and I'm sure he had big plans and big dreams for the NFL. So it's truly heartbreaking that we're not going to get to see what he can do. My thoughts go out to the entire Haskins family, and the entire NFL universe. Thoughts goes out to the Haskins family. This is truly a tragedy, and I mean, hopefully, in some way, something good can come out of this.
Definitely. And I mean, I think if there's going to be something that comes out of this, it's the inspiration that he was. I know that I've seen so many players that he played with in college, he played with in Washington and in Pittsburgh that were talking about how much of a stand-up dude he was and how it's such a big loss, not just for football itself, but we lost a good man here. So it's very sad to hear that this news that passed this past weekend.
Well, as heartbreaking and hard as it is, we got to move on to our next topic. So let's go ahead and just catch everybody up on what has happened this week in free agency. Not a whole lot, not a lot of big moves, I would say. A lot more of rumors being the big news rather than the actual signings. Calais Campbell is returning to the Ravens, so that's a decent signing, although he is pretty getting up there in age, so I don't know how many years he has left in him. Some of the rumors that we were talking about, the Ravens are also in talks with Melvin Gordon. That's an interesting one, especially when they have such a deep running back room. Might not have seemed like it last year because all of them got hurt in week one, but they do still have a deep running back room. And the Eagles emerging as frontrunners for Tyrann Mathieu almost out of nowhere. Matthew was rumored to go to the Steelers for a long time, and then out of nowhere, boom, Eagles are front runners. So, George, how you feeling about that one?
I mean, the Eagles need a safety, especially because Rodney McLeod just left for good. So that would be interesting. I think that would also really put the Eagles in interesting conversation for potential last round pick as a fantasy defense. They were already decent last year because they got enough sacks and they held some teams down in the second half of the season. So that'd be interesting to see how that defense would work with him there. We'll have to see if that pans out.
Absolutely. It's going to be exciting to see. I'd love to see Tyrann Mathieu go to the Eagles. I still watch the Eagles. I still root for the Eagles. And Tyrann Mathieu is one of my favorite players in the NFL, so I'd love to see that. And I think it'd be a good fit. Moving on, we got Brandon Cooks. He got a 2-year extension with the Texans. There was talks of him getting traded, but I'd assume with the extension that this means he will not be traded. He is going to stay there. Some help for Davis Mills or maybe somebody else. We'll get to some of that a little later. That's just a little preview. But then we also have some tight end news. First off, we got Gronkowski says he will only play for the Bucks if he decides to play. No announcement there just yet. We are still waiting. But arguably the biggest news of all of free agency because of how much we love him on this podcast, and that is the man, the myth, the Ferk, Anthony Ferkser, former Titans tight end, has signed with the Falcons. So he is going back to play with Arthur Smith. He was the offensive coordinator for the Titans when Ferkser was having his best season. So probably the best fit for him. He obviously won't be the starter because they do have Kyle Pitts, but Ferkser as a number 2 could be a sneaky option, especially with not a lot of weapons over there in Atlanta.
But hear me out, and don't hear what I'm not saying also, because don't go out and draft Anthony Ferkser in your fantasy drafts. Maybe if you have a situation where you're in a really deep dynasty league, you can kind of stash him just in case. They have no wide receivers. We talked about them a little bit last week in the wide receiver show. Kyle Pitts might be primarily a wide receiver this year. I mean, they have him and Cordarrelle Patterson, who both could play wide receiver, and if there's no one else around, Ferkser could be the starting tight end if he stays healthy also. That was his problem last year. He had the chance to start with the Titans and couldn't really stay on the field, but there's a good chance he's going to be basically irrelevant in that offense. But he's one of those weird guys that, like, like I said, if you're in a deep dynasty league and you have nothing else in free agency, you just have an open roster spot, maybe worth a random flyer, but probably not going to pan out.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely stayed healthy the whole year. Injuries were not the reason he couldn't stay on the field. The reason he couldn't stay on the field is because he just underperformed. We expected so much out of him, and I mean, he's great in the clutch moments. You get down in the red zone, and it's 3rd and goal, and you need this touchdown to win the game. He's the guy that's gonna step up and make the catch. Um, but the main reason why he wasn't on the field is because he can't block at all. He's a terrible blocking tight end. He is definitely a receiving tight end through and through. So unless he can fix his blocking issues, he's not going to be on the field very much for the Falcons either. But who knows? He's going back to the offensive coordinator, now head coach Arthur Smith, that he had his best seasons with. So maybe that's the turning point he needs. But that's to if we're being
I actually
honest.
Do want to circle back to one other. Oh, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Melvin Gordon rumors to the Ravens, especially because if you guys listened to us back before the Super Bowl, Cody and I did a little 3-round, way too early mock draft, and we were very high on J.K. Dobbins. Melvin Gordon seems to fit the whole of they still think they need running backs. So that makes me think that maybe they're not as high on J.K. Dobbins coming back from this injury as we expected. There was also rumors out there that maybe he had more damage to his knee or damage to both knees. That things we didn't quite know from the injury originally. So that Ravens backfield is a major question mark. And if they sign Melvin Gordon, there's a chance that Melvin Gordon won't even really be a relevant running back because they're getting back Dobbins and Edwards. It could be another messy backfield like it was last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nobody really wants to see a running back by committee of 3, 4 people. I mean, that's messy, especially on a team like the Ravens, where most of the rushing yards are probably going to come from the quarterback anyway. So uh, it's starting to look more and more like a backfield to completely ignore. However, Melvin Gordon is a pass catching back, and Lamar has struggled with his arm. I mean, whether you're a Lamar fan or not, you have to admit that he has not been throwing the ball as well as you would like to see out of a starting quarterback. And having that safety net that he can just dump it down to a receiving back and let him do the work, I mean, that could really be big for the Ravens. We'll have to see, one, if he signs, and two, if he does sign, how that pans out. But I think that's enough for today on the free agent updates. Like I said, not a lot of updates. So let's go ahead and move on to our draft preview. We have quarterbacks and tight ends is what we're going to be focusing on today. So, George, why don't you break us down on what we're going to be talking about with the quarterbacks?
All right, so if you remember last week, Cody and I kind of talked about a couple of teams that were maybe looking for wide receivers in the first 2 rounds. So we're going to be doing that as well with the quarterback position. Even though this draft is not super deep at quarterback, if you told me that there were no quarterbacks taken in the first round based on talent, I might agree with you. But this is one of the most overdrafted positions in the league because everyone knows they need that good to great quarterback to compete for a Super Bowl. So there's going to be guys going in the first round. Maybe even all 5 of the guys that we're going to talk about will go there. So like I said, we're going to talk about the top 5. We'll rank them from 1 to 5, and we'll see maybe if maybe we'll find some fits that we think they might go in the first round. So why don't we start off, Tyler? Why don't you start talking about some teams that could be looking for quarterbacks to start day one?
Yes. There's quarterback needy is definitely a vague term. You have quarterback needy teams, as in guys who need a quarterback right now to be their starter, and you have your quarterback needy teams that like a team like the Bucks, for example, who have Tom Brady. They definitely don't need a quarterback right now, but they don't have a future plan. So having a young guy to come in and learn from Tom Brady and then take over next year or the year after that, whenever he finally decides to actually retire, uh, could pay big dividends. But there are 3 teams that I think you can make an argument that if they draft a quarterback, that guy could be starting week 1. He could be their number 1. And those 3 teams would be Seattle. As we know, they traded away Russell Wilson, so they are in need of a quarterback. Right now, all they have is Drew Lock, and I don't think they're going to view Drew Lock as a starting caliber quarterback. Carolina, they did trade for Sam Darnold, but I don't think Darnold is the guy over there either. They right away regretted it, and they're looking for another option over there as well. And finally, we have Atlanta. As much as it breaks my heart to say, I would love Mariota to be the starter all year long and really get another chance. But uh, Mariota is not viewed as a starting quarterback anymore. So that's another team that a rookie could come in, depending on who they get, and start day one.
Definitely. And I think they're pretty much in an order that what you said is how likely they are to start day one. Seattle, even though they traded for Drew Lock, I think that was just kind of a piece coming back. I think there's pretty obvious if they get a quarterback in the first round of the draft, he's going to be their starter. Carolina has really not sounded good. Atlanta, it's going to be a competition. So Mariota's going to get his shot, but there's a good chance they might lean a rookie knowing that they are in a rebuild mode. I think that was a good start there. Now, as you said, there's actually 3 tiers here. So what are a couple of teams that could have a quarterback start by the end of the season?
So some teams that could have a quarterback starting by the end of the season, aka the starter could get replaced based off of how they play. Teams like New Orleans, they have Jameis Winston right now. Every year they're looking for a replacement, so I don't think they're fully locked in on that guy. It's just he was their best option at the time, so they re-signed him. That's definitely a team that he could replace their starting quarterback. Pittsburgh, they got Mitch Trubisky. The dude's been replaced once; he can be replaced again. That's another team that I don't think a rookie will come in and start over Trubisky week 1, but I do think he could be starting over Trubisky by the end of the season. Detroit, whether they're sold on Jared Goff or not yet, that's still yet to be seen. They had some struggles last year, but that is more than just Goff's fault. So you don't know if they get some other offensive pieces and they feel like Goff is the thing holding them back. A rookie could slot in there by the end of the year. We still have the Texans. Again, another team that you could make an argument a rookie could come in and start week 1. However, they seem very, very high on Davis Mills. I don't see them replacing Davis Mills right away. But Davis Mills is still not a guy that we view as a franchise level quarterback. So if he underperforms, that could be a replacement. And finally, we got the Giants. Daniel Jones, he just hasn't gotten it done since he's been there. Every year we talk about, is this his last year? Is this his last year? Well, this one might actually be his last year. And depending on how he plays, he might not even make it to the end of the year. If they got somebody like, we'll talk about the top quarterbacks, but if they get one of the top quarterbacks, they do have a chance of replacing Daniel Jones before the season is over.
Definitely. And I think this tier is the tier I'm watching, maybe even a little more than that could start day one teams that we talked about, because a lot of top 10 picks in this section. Detroit's picking second. There's rumors they might trade out of that if they don't want to take a quarterback. but they could very well take the first quarterback off the board. Jacksonville picks first. They're probably not going to replace Trevor Lawrence, let's be honest. So Detroit could take a quarterback, or they could trade out to let someone get a quarterback. Very interesting there. Other top 10 picks, the Giants have the 5th pick. So, sorry, 5th and 7th, actually. So 2 picks in the top 7. Good time to take a quarterback. We'll see if they really are just saying this about Daniel Jones or if they're going to go out and get it. And then the Texans pick 3rd. So, especially if Detroit doesn't take a quarterback and doesn't trade out for a team to take one, they could have their pick at the bunch, even though they seem high on Davis Mills. This is the tier I'm watching because even though there's better quarterbacks here than those top 3 teams we mentioned, they're in prime position to go get the guy they want in this draft.
Absolutely. Absolutely, George. I think there's still one more tier we got to discuss. And, I talked about the top 2 tiers. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the 3rd tier here?
All right. So this tier, we're talking about teams who could get a guy a little later, or if one of these guys falls way down to the end of the 1st or the 2nd round, could get a guy to start maybe after the season. Maybe they think he's a guy that needs to be molded into a franchise quarterback instead of starting right away. So I know Tyler mentioned Tampa Bay earlier. They did draft a quarterback last year, but you never know how they're going to replace Tom Brady. They could be in the market for a quarterback late in the 1st round or in the 2nd round. The Tennessee Titans. We know that there was a lot of talk after their playoff game that we don't know about Ryan Tannehill. Can he do it? They could be looking at a quarterback if one falls. The Indianapolis Colts, they just traded for Matt Ryan. That's a stopgap. We all know what I already said about the Colts. When I don't understand how they made that trade when they were just trying to not, just temporarily fill the position. Maybe they're going to go out and get a guy to sit behind him now. The Raiders are an interesting case. I mean, maybe a lot of people think Derek Carr is going to stay there long term. Very possible. But there seems to be rumors every single year that Carr might get traded. Never know if they're going to try to find someone to sit behind him. The Dolphins just loaded up around Tua, and if he fails, maybe someone's got to step in. So we're going to see if they're going to be in the market for anybody in the quarterback room. The Vikings just extended Kirk Cousins, but we all know that they're not super happy with Kirk right now. He did come out this week and say that he wants to prove he can be a Viking till he retires, but maybe the Vikings don't agree. And then finally, the Washington Commanders just traded for Carson Wentz, but the Colts didn't like him. If the Commanders don't, maybe they'll be in there for a guy for later.
It's possible. It is definitely possible. Carson Wentz just seems to keep failing on every team he goes to. Not that I think he's really failing, but whatever team he's on, they don't seem to really be sold on him. So there is a chance that he goes to the Commanders and struggles and replace him. However, they do still have Taylor Heineke, and I think they still got Ryan Fitzpatrick too, coming off an injury. But it remains to be seen. So now that we have discussed our quarterback needy teams, that gives you some ideas of who might be looking at a quarterback. With so many teams already having their set guy, at least to us, it looks like they have their set guy. There really is a lot of quarterback needy teams, so it's going to be an interesting draft. You don't really know where anybody's going to fall. So let's go ahead and talk about those top quarterbacks on the market and see where we think they might land.
I'll start us off here, Tyler. So I think the guy who's probably been the biggest mover since the beginning of the season, and the guy, at least even maybe in this draft process postseason, is Malik Willis, quarterback out of Liberty. So where's Liberty? Yeah, I don't know. You're going to be hearing a lot of quarterbacks in this top 5 that are from non-power schools in college. So a lot of question marks. I kind of compare Malik Willis to Trey Lance in that draft pick kind of last year because he didn't play against top competition. He really needs to be molded into a starting quarterback in the NFL, but he has the tools. So I'll also give an NFL comp here before I pass it over to Tyler. I think NFL.com had the most interesting one because they said he has the arm of Jay Cutler, which I didn't think was a good thing, but I think they're talking about a strong arm, not necessarily an accurate one. And then the athleticism and play style of Jalen Hurts, because he is very good at breaking the pocket, running when he needs to, and being a dual threat against defenses.
Yeah, I will say that Malik Willis is probably my favorite quarterback out of the draft. We saw the videos from his pro day where he was throwing the football almost the entire length of the field with perfect accuracy, and that's just nuts. There's an old saying that coaches used to say of you can't coach that, which is find the guys that have the things you can't coach, uh, but and you can fix the things you can coach. So arm strength is something you can't coach. You can't go in and be like, I need you to throw the ball further. Like you just can't do that. And Malik Willis already has that. Now his play style and trying to become a professional quarterback. Now that's the kind of things that you can coach. Whether it sticks with him or not is, I mean, that's what we're going to be looking at this season or next season, depending on where he goes. But he's got the parts of his game that you cannot coach, and you can build him up from there. So he is definitely an exciting quarterback. He is talked about going to a team like the Seahawks or the Panthers that need a quarterback right away. But personally, I feel like he'd be better fit as going to a team that he doesn't start right away. Personally, I think that he could learn from somebody else, really build his game, mold his game into an NFL style, and go from there. That is what I like about Malik Willis. But I'll move on to the next guy. And we got Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh, which is also not a power school. He is a pocket passer with decent mobility. That's, something you don't hear a lot about anymore is pocket passer. What does that even mean? It means it's not going to be Lamar Jackson scrambling out to the left when something's not happening. He is going to stay in the pocket like a Peyton Manning style and take the hits and deliver the ball. He is more worried about throwing the ball than he is about running the ball. But he does still have some decent mobility. He is not the best touch and accuracy, but some say that only looks bad because of some drops. Pittsburgh had a lot of drops last season, so his stats aren't going to look as good. But he could end up being successful in the NFL. The NFL comp that I would use would be not don't have recency bias. Would be Andy Dalton, but prime Andy Dalton back when he was starting for the Bengals and actually looking pretty good. That is the type of quarterback that I think you're going to get out of Kenny Pickett. Another good quarterback option, not as exciting as recent years past, but still a guy with a lot of potential in this league.
Yeah, and I think you're going to hear a lot of guys that were like, this guy's good at this, but like there's no Trevor Lawrence in this draft. There's not even a Zach Wilson in this draft. Like the first guy compared to Trey Lance. Trey Lance was arguably the fourth or fifth best quarterback in last year's draft, according to some people going into the actual draft itself. So Kenny Pickett even being ranked second behind that. These guys are going to need a mold into something. They might start day one if they go to the right team. Like you said, there's a couple of teams that really don't have anything. If he ends up in Seattle, maybe he goes there, but I don't know if Seattle even gets up that far to get him. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Where could I see Kenny Pickett falling? I think he could fit a style that Carolina kind of runs. I think he could be a similar quarterback to what Sam Darnold was last year. So I think they're interested in Malik Willis, but Kenny Pickett, I think, kind of fits the system that they've had for quarterbacks already.
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely. He
I
is
can move
definitely
us
an
on.
interesting one.
Yeah, I can move us on to maybe the guy who went to the biggest school out of all of these, and it's Ole Miss. Matt Corral, another more of a pocket passer, but Ole Miss is a very quarterback friendly system for college. They run a lot of RPOs, they give easy reads to the quarterback. So the biggest question with him has to be, I mean, first, does he have the ability to break sacks and have the anticipation in the pocket if he does have to hold the ball? But can he read the field? We don't know if he can go through progressions, be that pocket passer, and he doesn't have the legs to really be that scrambler that the NFL is going to. So he's really got to improve on reading defenses, reading plays, going through progressions. He has a strong arm, and he is confident enough to throw the deep ball. But a lot of times last season, they were shown that he babies the short throws. He's kind of afraid to hit the tight windows, and sometimes that gets him in trouble with throwing some of those RPOs or easy passes even. So another major work in progress. The NFL comp for him I have is Baker Mayfield. Not a lot of great comps, honestly.
No, and Baker Mayfield coming out of college, we were like, finally, the Browns found a quarterback. So that Baker Mayfield looks good, but recency, Yeah, we're like, I don't know if you want to be like Baker Mayfield. He's definitely not the guy you want to be compared to. Potential, but never quite elite. Never probably will be elite. Um, Guys, I'm going to continue here. We do still have two more quarterbacks, but this is a fantasy podcast, and listen to what we're saying here. We have these guys that are like, they're good, but so what does that mean for fantasy? I'm telling you right now, none of these quarterbacks here should be your top quarterback target in a redraft league. You're going into a redraft league, you want to take a chance on a guy who earns the starting job for a team as a backup quarterback. You probably could do that as a backup, but know that there's risks involved. We're not really talking about any of these guys for anything more than a dynasty draft this season. If you do have a dynasty league, these guys go to somewhere you like. Maybe you have a chance to get a steal later in their career in a year or two from now. But right away in their first year, their rookie year, I don't think you're going to see a lot of rookie records broken. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our next guy. We got Desmond Ritter out of Cincinnati. His confidence and leadership moved him up the board. Uh, but he's also not from a power conference. He might be the best field reader of the group, but he's still not confident in that skill. He's a pocket passer who can run, but probably shouldn't more than he needs to. Um, my comp to that would be Alex Smith. Same thing, a guy who is a pocket passer. He can run, but he probably shouldn't, and that is not a hit on his broken leg from when he ran. So let's ignore that. Um, but yeah, he's Desmond Ritter's another guy that I think is going to be a game manager. He's a guy that could slot in for a team. He could, do enough to win. If you go to a team like the Titans, where they have a AJ Brown, a Derrick Henry, all those pieces. All you need is a game manager. But if you go to one of the other teams that don't have as good of pieces around them, you need a more exciting quarterback that can make things happen. Desmond Ritter might not be that guy.
Definitely. He was somebody who did show a lot of improvement throughout this year. He was one of the guys that was not really on teams' radars, at least as an early round pick coming into the year. And then by the end of the year, he's improved his game enough that he is now in this top group of quarterbacks, as good or bad as they may be. But really, if he was at a bigger school, if he was doing what he was doing in Cincinnati at, I don't even want to say in Alabama because they're like, a much more powerful school, but in a conference like that, in the Big Ten, in the SEC, he would probably be looked at a lot better, because if they know he can be a game manager in that system, he would definitely probably be higher than fourth on the quarterback board in this draft, because teams are just looking for somebody who is more teams are looking for somebody who is more NFL ready. He might have the skill set to be more like that. It's just not proven against competition, and he still has as many question marks as the rest of them. So fourth on our list, Desmond Ritter. I can move us on to fifth here. Sam Howell out of North Carolina. He is the other more dual threat quarterback of the group. So a lot more like Malik Willis, who we talked about at number one. He passed for 3,000 yards and ran for over 800 in his last season, his junior year. He's coming out in his junior year. He also had 3 games of 300 yards passing and 100 yards rushing last year. That is second all time in college, behind only Lamar Jackson. I think Sam Howell is a very interesting case, a lot similar to Malik Willis, where he needs to be molded as a passer a lot more, but he might be able to get away with things in his rookie year with his legs. My NFL comp for him is Jalen Hurts. I know we already used Jalen Hurts as part of a comp for Malik Willis, but Sam Howell and Jalen Hurts more accurately go together, where Malik Willis had a stronger arm than Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and you know what? You might think that these guys are never going to be used because they don't have the arm abilities, but we're seeing a new turnover in the NFL. This isn't the NFL of old, where you need to be the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, the Eli Mannings, where you are a pocket passer and you don't move. This isn't the era where quarterbacks are used as quarterbacks and that is it. And you might see one flashy play to a quarterback in a playoff game and forever be known as the Philly special, and woo, it's exciting. This is a new era of football. We are seeing the Lamar Jacksons put the game on their back because of their mobility. We are seeing the Taysom Hills, who are used as a Swiss Army knife because they can play quarterback or tight end or something else. I mean, it's you don't know with the NFL these days. You take somebody with this kind of mobility that can also throw, and you might be able to do some funky things with them. I mean, look at what they did with Mariota in Vegas last year. I mean, when he was healthy and on the field, they put him in for a couple plays. Suddenly you're like, oh crap, I don't know if this guy's going to throw it or run it. We game plan for Derek Carr, who's a pocket passer. Now we don't really know what to do. And he made big plays happen. And that's what these guys can still do. Just because they're not going to step in and be the elite quarterback. I mean, they could be. They could surprise everybody, but they're not expected to step in and be that elite quarterback. But just because they're not elite doesn't mean that they can't still make things happen and be relevant in this league.
So true. We really, I think I want to see where some of the fits are, like where some of these quarterbacks go before I really rank them. I mean, what we gave you here was our ranking 1 to 5 based on true talent, but that might not be the way we rank them going into dynasty drafts, depending on where they fall. Because sometimes, like if Sam Howell goes to a team like Carolina and they're trying to make him more of a pocket passer, that might be a problem. I'm not even saying that Carolina might do that. They should work their offense around the quarterback they have. But just an example, you never really know where people are going to fall. So the quarterback position, as we've been kind of talking it down the entire offseason process so far, is a question mark, but there are our top 5 to watch for the draft coming up. We also said we're going to talk about tight ends. It might be a little bit more short here on the tight end position because I don't see there being that many picks in. I don't think anyone's going to go in the first round. There's not the Kyle Pitts in this year's draft. So everybody we're talking about here is going to be more the Pat Freiermuth level from last year or lower. There's a chance that somebody breaks out if they get to the right position. And saying that, why don't we talk about tight end needy teams before we talk about the tight ends themselves? Tyler, do you want to break down some of the teams we talk about that may be able to take a tight end and turn them into something in year one?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just another thing to keep in mind as we talk about these guys is even if they do come out and they are exciting, like Fryermuth had a season last year, Kyle Pitts had a season, but we usually don't see rookie tight ends do anything. So, again, this is another set of guys that I'm not saying draft them as your number one in fantasy this year because they went to the right team and expect them to be big. Uh, Obviously, we'll have to break this all down after they are drafted. But for the most part, a lot of these guys are going to be better down the road, better redraft guys in a couple of years from now, or good dynasty picks right now. But anyway, going back to the question I was originally asked, the tight end needy teams right now, you have the Minnesota Vikings, you got the Saints, you got the Packers. They lost Tunyon. Or no, they got Tunyon back. That's right. But he still
They
has
got
not been
Tunyon
able to
back,
stay
but you
on
never
the
know.
field. You have the Jets, the Panthers, the Jaguars are always an interesting one. They have gone after a tight end in free agency, but that still could use another one, especially with Trevor Lawrence looking so sketchy last year. They could definitely use some more safety net pieces for him. You have the Bengals, you have the Colts, and you have, of course, my Tennessee Titans.
Yes, we do. So I'm gonna kind of just read down some names here, and I'll just kind of cherry pick a couple of things. You can add some stuff in if you'd like to. Then Tyler, I'm going to give you our top 7 tight ends. So number 1 on our list is Trey McBride. 2 is Cade Otton. 3, Greg Dulcich. 4, Isaiah Likely. 5, Jeremy Ruckert. 6, Jalen Wondermeyer. I think I'm saying that right. There's some interesting tight end names. The quarterbacks kept me calm, but the tight ends had me on my toes. And then number 7 is Jelani Woods. I'm gonna start with my favorite is Trey McBride out of this group. He's a comp similar to an Austin Hooper, so nothing special. But Austin Hooper had some decent years in the right position. So if you see him go to a team that wants to use a tight end, there's someone that may be effective in year one, but probably not. We know that tight ends are not normally effective in year one. And then I'll also mention, because Cody said it in our group chat earlier today, to mention Jelani Woods is his favorite, even though he's number 7 on our list.
Yeah, and you know what? I would actually like to see Trey McBride go to the Titans, not because I think he'd be that great of a fit, not because I think he's my favorite tight end, but because every team has that guy on their team that does really, really well in the preseason and becomes that preseason hero that the fan base all knows his name and wants him to become something big, uh, but only your fan base knows who he is. George, we make fun of you for your preseason heroes every season, but every team has them. And Trey McBride was the name of a wide receiver who was the Titans' preseason hero for years. Um, and it would just be really funny for after we've had the hero Trey McBride on our team for years for him to then leave, and now we get Trey McBride, the tight end. I'd kind of like that to happen. I think that'd be funny.
That honestly would be funny. I had even forgot about Trey McBride, so I think it's funny you brought that up. I'll go a little deeper into Jelani Woods here, just because I know Cody will probably be mad if we don't talk about him more since it is his favorite. And I think, Tyler, you're going to understand why it was his favorite because I found out he was a quarterback coming out of high school that transitioned to tight end, and his NFL comparison is Jordan Thomas. I think you know that Cody has a man crush on Jordan Thomas.
That he does. That he does. It is definitely one of his favorite players. Yeah, a lot of you also got to think about some of these guys are not going to be your receiving tight ends. One guy is Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State. He could be your receiving tight end, but he is a big dude. Go look him up. He is 6'6", 250, did 19 reps on the bench press. Like he is a big man. That is a guy that can definitely just go out there and yeah, he could be your big target in the red zone, but most likely he is going to be a great blocker. He's going to be great at the pick play, getting in the way, knocking some people off their route. That is definitely a guy that I would like to look at for any team that already has a good receiving tight end and then has this big dude to open things up otherwise. Or go to a team, again, I know I always go back to the Titans, but I'll change it up. What about going to a team like the Vikings? You get a big man like that in front of Dalvin Cook, a run first team, and open things up for him. That really could be good.
I have one more guy I want to talk about, and then we can wrap it up if you have nothing else going on here, Tyler. I want to talk about Isaiah Likely because he actually is somebody who is ranked a lot lower, I think, on a lot of people's rankings than ours. We have him here at number 4. And I think a big part of that, he did go to Coastal Carolina, not the biggest school, but he is a big play kind of tight end. He would be probably the closest to a Kyle Pitts, in my opinion. He's definitely not as talented physically and doesn't have quite the intangibles, but he had 5 touchdowns of 50 plus yards in college. Just shows that he has the ability to break the big play at the tight end position. He's probably his NFL comparison, according to NFL.com, is Delanie Walker, which I know is something that you can appreciate there. So we like the big playability, especially as a fantasy podcast, which is probably why we have him higher than a lot of teams do scouting wise. He would definitely have to go to an ideal position to be a good tight end from day one, but someone to keep an eye on, keep in the back of your mind, maybe take a flyer on in your dynasty drafts late if he's still on the board and he goes to a good position.
Two other guys to mention real quick before we move on. You got Cole Turner out of Nevada. He is another big dude, 6'6", 250 as well. But this guy has comparisons to Mike Gesicki, and that's definitely a good comparison. I know Gesicki hasn't turned on to become elite, but he's definitely an exciting tight end, and any team would be lucky to have a guy like that. And then I'm about to butcher this so bad, but that's fine. Because you mentioned Delanie Walker, another guy being compared to Delanie Walker is uh, Chigoziem Okonkwo out of Maryland. I probably butchered that so bad. You can make fun of me in the comments. That is totally fine. But this is a smaller tight end. This isn't the guy that you're going to expect to come in there and be that really big dude opening things up. This is going to be your tight end that's borderline a receiver. He is 6'2", 238, and ran a 4.5 40. He is a quick, smaller tight end. He, only really had 2 big games last year. One of them was against Penn State, so that's kind of funny. But this guy is a smaller guy, but he definitely can open up the field with 4.5 speed from a tight end. That's insane. He could definitely be exciting. He can create some plays if his size doesn't become a problem. He could go somewhere and become productive real quick.
I just want to let you know, to ease your mind a little bit before we wrap this up. His nickname is Chig. Like, they just call him Chig. So if he does end up being relevant in this league, you don't have to worry about pronouncing that name all the time.
Oh, thank God.
Well, if you have nothing else to add, I think we can start to wrap up the show here. I'm not gonna cut off your getting involved, but thank you all for listening into this episode of the Couch GMs podcast. I know Cody was sad he could not be here for some draft preview. He is our draft guy, and he will be back next week with me to talk about the running back position. So make sure you stay tuned. And then Tyler will be back with us in 2 weeks when we go our final draft preview and maybe do some mock draft fun with you all. So make sure you're keeping tuned to our social medias as well. There might be another competition coming up here.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for listening. You know, we George and I do our research, but we will not begin to tell you that we are guys that are fans of college football. You know, I like college football. I find it interesting, but there's just too much to follow. I don't dive enough into it to really know these prospects coming in. I'll be the first one to admit that. I have to do my research. Cody, on the other hand, is our draft guy. We all have our niche, and that is Cody's. He is good about the draft. That is his favorite thing. So definitely, when Cody comes back, he'll be able to dive deeper into these prospects. You know, the tight end class and the quarterback class are not super exciting for this season. So when we move on from here, we might see some better prospects, especially for redraft leagues, hopefully, because a lot of these guys so far have just been dynasty names, not really redraft names. But either way, I'm super happy to be here with you guys. It's always exciting when I finally get to have an episode. It's weird to have two Couch GMs, and I'm one of the two. That's really strange, but happy to be here. And you know what, guys? Go make fun of me in the comments for how I pronounce that name. Go make fun of me for the amount of times that I stopped talking and stuttered this episode. I don't know what's gotten into me, but apparently I can't talk today. Go make
Cody's
fun of me in the
not
comments.
here, so you had to be him.
Somebody had to mess up. Either way, it'll be funny. We all are lighthearted about it. We like listening to it. We'll make fun of you back. Don't worry. It's just how it goes. Either way, this podcast is more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved. So please get involved.
Yes, it is Tyler. Thank you one more time for listening in to the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder, soon to be in the Bat Cave, I'm George Kerth. We'll see you all next week.
Boom.